We had an administration that allowed people to come in freely into our country from not only South America, but from all over the world. The border should never and can never be forgotten. It's a sin, what they did, and you are helping us out, and we appreciate it.
President Trump welcoming El Salvador's President Bukele to the White House in a meeting that cements Bukele's role as one of Trump's closest foreign allies on immigration enforcement, digital infrastructure, and security cooperation. And they're getting to some help from DOJ, rather, to develop the infrastructure to revoke parole, cancel visas, and strip Social Security numbers from thousands of undocumented immigrants. The first target, more than 6,000 illegal names, including people on the FBI terror watch list. Bitcoin could also be on the agenda. The president promised to make America the crypto capital of the world. And Bitcoin bull Bukele is reshaping the El Salvadorian economy around digital assets, recently making crypto legal tender in El Salvador. So there's a lot going on here. And Charles, what interests me the most is how the president is kind of putting what happened the last 4 years behind us. He wasn't in control then, and we had this mass migration. But he is trying to mend some fences with these leaders to right the ship, and that seems to be what's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need people like this. Of course, we talk about Argentina a lot as well. I was going to go down to El Salvador last year. I couldn't put it together, but this whole thing with the volcano, using that to power the Bitcoin mining, they're going all in on this digital asset stuff and Bitcoin mining. And you know, our housekeeper for almost 30 years, she's from El Salvador. She just got back. She goes about twice a year. And, you know, she just raves. She just raves about what's going on. She says, my country, everything. Everybody want my country. All the other countries, they want my president. That means just loves it. Says the streets are clean. Says the crime is down. And, you know, he's been extraordinarily effective. He's the kind of modern day leader we need in this hemisphere, I think.
So you've got a twofer here, Brian, because we're talking about security and security of our border, but we're also talking about economics. What do you make of what El Salvador is trying to do with Bitcoin and what Trump wants to do with Bitcoin?
Well, this Bukele guy is such an interesting guy, okay? And I'm glad that our president is interacting with him the way that he is. I think it's important because there's one other party in the world who really, really wants to be on good terms with El Salvador, and that's China. So China's been courting El Salvador for many years. In fact, interestingly, in 2023, China builds El Salvador's new national library. They just finished building a huge amusement park for El Salvador, both gifts to El Salvador. And right now, they're building the nation's largest soccer stadium. Okay, China gifts to El Salvador. So there's something going on in El Salvador that the world's powers really want to be a part of. I don't think we were playing offense with El Salvador under Biden. I'm glad we are now under Trump because, you know, if it's not us, it's going to be China. And El Salvador this is what they are. They're not the most liberty-oriented country in Central America, probably. They're not the most democratically oriented, some would say.
In Central America?
Well, okay. I see what you're saying there. I see what you're saying. But here's my point. He's getting results in some really big... He reminds me kind of like an Ataturk in Turkey. You know, taking a country and really transforming it. But you're not always going to say, well, he's a really sort of liberal, liberty-oriented guy, but he's just fixing problems. And I think that's why people who are there are really giving him the benefit of the doubt right now.
Yeah. And he's very eager to work with Trump, Dagan.
Absolutely. And I'll just note that Bukele just made this comment about Abrego Garcia. There's the Supreme Court decision over him being deported to El Salvador. Bukele said, when asked, how would I return him to the United States? Would I smuggle him? It's a preposterous question. He said, why would I release a terrorist into the country? Will you release him in El Salvador? So the Salvadoran president says they won't be returning Abrego Garcia. And there's an issue because and Stephen Miller was talking about this on the news channel earlier, but he's a Salvadoran citizen. So they're arguing that it's not, how can the United States go into El Salvador and retrieve a man from a country, from another country,
Right.
and bring him back to the United States. And Stephen Miller said that the way that this Supreme Court decision had been portrayed over the weekend in the press was just upside down backwards. My words, not his.
It's really interesting to see how the administration now is going to provide those daily updates about Abrego Garcia's status. I guess going forward, it's going to be he remains in El Salvador, apparently, since the president of El Salvador says he's not going to return him. I think that also, I was taking note about your comment, Brian, about the relationship between El Salvador and China, also because not only have they gotten closer to China with the gifts from China, they've also separated themselves a bit from Taiwan. Going back to 2018, El Salvador broke with Taiwan, recognizing Beijing instead. And this is something that President Bukele, since he's taken office, since in 2019, has continued to do so. So as we're kind of navigating these new relationships, this kind of seems like an opportunity where the U.S. through El Salvador could keep China close, and the idea of keeping your enemies closer than your friends. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Maybe it's not a bad idea to really have a strong relationship with El Salvador for many reasons, including access to China.
Yeah, absolutely.